this video today, I'm going to be comparing the Rebel Moon franchise from Zack Snyder that's on Netflix to the Twilight franchise, which is based on a series of books of the same name. There's 5 Twilight movies and only 3 Rebel Moon movies. To be clear, I haven't actually seen any of these movies. I just know about them because I've watched YouTube videos discussing them. Because of that, I have a fairly good idea of what these movies are about, but obviously I don't remember all the details. When it comes to the highest Rotten Tomatoes score for each franchise, Rebel Moon has a high score of 50%, and then with Twilight, the highest score is a 49% for both Breaking Dawn Part 2 as well as the first movie. So by literally only 1%, Rebel Moon wins this round. Then when you look at lowest score for each franchise, in the case of Rebel Moon, Part 2, the Part 2 of the non-director's cut version of Rebel Moon only has a 17%. With Twilight, the lowest score would be a 25% for Breaking Dawn Part 1, which actually means Twilight is going to win this round. Then when we look at average score, Rebel Moon right now is an average of 29. Twilight only has an average of 39. Obviously, it's still a bad average, but it's higher than Rebel Moon, so Twilight actually wins this round. Then when you look at gap between lowest and highest score, in the case of Rebel Moon, you got a gap of 33 between 17 and 50. In the case of Twilight, you got a gap of 24 between 49 and 25, meaning the gap is smaller for Twilight, so Twilight actually is going to win this round, which actually means Twilight has won 3 rounds, which means it's actually going to win this debate regardless of my personal opinion, and that's a bit unfortunate for me because I would easily choose the Rebel Moon franchise. Why is that? Well, similar to what I talked about when I did a video comparing Divergent to 50 Shades of Grey. In this case, it's a difference between a series of movies I just think are not well done, that are not good for the director, to a series of movies that I think send a really bad message. In the case of Rebel Moon, oh man, I think this was a big miscalculation on the part of both Netflix as well as Zack Snyder. These movies have not done a good job of helping out Snyder's reputation. I think these movies are only going to serve to push more people away from Zack Snyder and burn trust in him from people who actually are fans of Zack Snyder. I think one of the big problems here, to be honest, is this whole thing comes off as way too derivative of Star Wars and other works, so it's just not interesting. And also, I think this whole story of Rebel Moon has been stretched out way too long. There's too much slow motion. I mean, as people have talked about, you have slow motion of people just farming grain. That's it. Slow motion for something that simple and mundane. I mean, it's one thing when you're talking about 300 where there's slow motion shots that are big, heroic, grand gestures. That's another thing when we're saying, oh, there's slow motion about people cooking grain. What? That's not good. And also, I think it was a big mistake to release the bland, generic PG-13 cut of Rebel Moon before putting out the R-rated director's cut. And also, we have yet another Zack Snyder director cut. I mean, think about it. We already did this with Batman v Superman, and then with Justice League, and now we're doing it again. So it's like, seriously? Every time Zack Snyder does something, he always has to have a director's cut. It just is really tiring. And to be honest, to me, this whole thing comes off like Zack Snyder and Netflix trying to replicate another release the Snyder Cut movement. On the case of Twilight, it's more than just, oh, the movies are badly done or they're incompetent or they're mediocre. No, in the case of Twilight, I think that these movies send a really bad message. First of all, let's start at the beginning. The basic premise of these movies is already super creepy. Let's think about this for a moment. The premise of Twilight is you have an underage girl that is being courted by a guy who is 100 years old and dead. ooh, yikes, that's already creepy enough as it is. But then on top of that, when you actually examine Edward and Bella's relationship, you're like, oh, wow, this is incredibly unhealthy, toxic, and codependent. Yikes, this sends a terrible, terrible message for teenage girls. I mean, just think for a minute about the second movie. You have a high school girl who gets suicidal because her high school boyfriend broke up with her. that is that is so unhealthy. I mean, think about it for a moment. If you're a high school kid, you break up with a romantic partner. Okay, if you're sad about it, yeah, that's one thing. Like, oh, I broke up with my boyfriend. I'm feeling down at the moment. Okay, that's healthy, but you have to be able to move on. You have to be able to keep living your life. If your response to your significant other breaking up with you is, oh, I don't have any reason left to live, that's a really bad sign. That shows you need some help, because that's a way too extreme reaction to losing a romantic partner. Also, man, if you think about Edward's behavior, ooh, yikes, is it abusive? I mean, just think about the first movie. He saves Bella from being hit by a car, and then we literally see Edward gaslight Bella into thinking that she didn't see what she actually saw. We literally hear Edward trying to make her think, oh, you're confused. You don't know what you're talking about. Can't you just drop it? Oh, no one's going to believe you. Yikes, that is a big red flag. And then when Edward's like, oh, I've been watching you. I just stand back for when you need me. Okay, so you got a guy who's following this girl without her consent, stalking her. That's bad. And also when you have the reveal that, oh, Edward actually likes to sneak into the room of this underage girl while she's sleeping, again, without her consent. Yikes, that is super bad. So, like what I was talking about with Divergent versus 50 Shades of Grey, it's one thing to say that this series of movies is badly done, or they're incompetent, or they're forgettable, or they don't do a good thing for they're not good for the director's reputation. It's another thing to say, oh, this series of movies I find to be just flat out offensive. It sends a really bad message. That's once again the case here. If I was forced at gunpoint to choose which series of movies am I going to watch, I would without hesitation choose Rebel Moon over Twilight. There's no way I'm ever watching Twilight. Well, that'll be it for this video today.